We are in orbit around Tylo with our J2. It's just the command pod now where we had to pretty much use every bit of everything possible to make orbit back around Tylo last time, making a 32.8 by 34.9 kilometer orbit, safely making orbit and awaiting a pretty much a tow truck to bring it on back home to Kerbin. Need to make sure that my mic is working good. Very good. Okay, so now we can go ahead and continue and wrap things up here at Tylo. I'm going to leave the tracking station, and we're going to go ahead and send another J2A out to that. The J2A is the deorbiting and landing assistance vessel that we created in the prior episode to landing and returning to orbit there at Tylo, which is this thingy right here. There's the booster that we separated from the J2, and then there's it connected to the J2A that we had sent out to it. So we're gonna launch one of those out to Joule and bring that thing home and wrap things up so we can find out what we're gonna be doing in future episodes. And as it stands, I have a few hours to fool around today, so figure we can go on ahead and get a beat on what that is going to end up being and go ahead and get started on that as well, barring no interruptions. But I digress. It's time to launch this thing and get this thing home. Good. Make sure it's the correct vessel. Alright, let's launch the J. Waiting to reach about 50 meters per second. Full sideways. I'm going to put it at about the 10-degree mark. Let it build up a little altitude. Really not a fan of those vectors and all their gimbling. They are great engines, just the gimbling is so terrible. Like, there's too much of it. Stages and get rid of that first central stage. Move away from all the vector engines there. I think we've built up enough altitude. I'm going to go full sideways now. I'm going to go to the map view, check out what's up, see what our apoapsis is. And as always, we're waiting for that to hit about 50,000 meters, then we're going to cut the throttle off, make our circularization, and prepare to hop on over to Joule and get ourselves over to Tylo. And hopefully this vessel will have everything needed to bring our Tylo mission vessel home. I gather that it will, though, considering that there should be way more Delta V with it this time attached to it, where there's not as much attached now, where we pretty much used everything up possible on that mission vessel. There's not going to be nearly as much weight for it to push. So now we just have to wait for this thing to reorient itself back to prograde. Hopefully, put ourselves in a good position to where it's going to have enough time to do that. And I guess there will be, though. Looks like it's time to stage 2. But we're not going to do that until we are pointing prograde, just in case. The beauty of symmetry and balance. Turned out to be a good lift and transfer vessel. We can use this for many things in the future here with all of our Joule missions, or Joule moons. So we're almost reoriented to prograde now. It's almost time to go ahead and stage. Go ahead and open the shield up just to have ready. And I'm going to go ahead and stage now. It's definitely close to time to circularize, I'd say. Just going to do that a little bit to get those engines away from us. Before we go full throttle and wrap that around so we're in orbit. Send those on their merry way. Beast of a vessel. Alright, now, let's get things going. Let's find out where Jewel is. There it is. Looks like we're almost right where we need to be to do this. We can just go ahead and give this a shot. This much out of our transfer window shouldn't matter too much, I would gather. We're on our way to being where we need to be to do it. Let's just go ahead and warp over there. Save ourselves some time. Pretty much nailed it. We just have to wait for that to reorient again. Do a little bit of a rotation along the way to balance this vessel's position a little better. Everything is in line there. Don't believe that's really necessary, but I like to do it. Don't know why. I'm just going to go ahead and zoom out now, since we're waiting. In fact, it really wouldn't hurt to go ahead and boost up a little bit on the throttle to get it there a little quicker. Once it's there, go full throttle. And we have about 400 and some meters per second of delta V left to add, so we'll know that we need to stage close to about 900 to 1,000 meters per second of velocity. So we'll wait for that. We're definitely not going to reach all the way out to Jewel before then. So it looks like it'll be about 1,040 meters per second or so, give or take. So we need to watch for that here in about another 100 meters per second. It'll be time to stage. We'll be well on our way out of the inner system. Let's go ahead and stage now. The vessel is actually more stable than it normally has been, but I probably jinxed it just now. We have 1,900 meters per second of delta V to go before we're out of this stage. It's not too bad. It's about how much we burnt already, almost. About 400 meters per second, or less, give or take. Granted that you have to get it up to about 400 to 500 meters per second to halfway reach your orbit around the moon, I believe. I'm not entirely sure. I never really keep track of that. I just watch the apoapsis and wait for it to hit about 50,000 and move on from there. I know it's not really a whole lot more. Once you reach that point, you can just wrap around to your apoapsis and use maybe 10 to 50 meters per second of delta V to make your orbit around the moon. So it's probably like close to 500 meters per second or so. So add that on top of the about 1,400 that we already had in the orbital velocity, and that equals out to about as much delta V that we had in the central stage once we decoupled and detached all the outer stages around the central stage. So it's kind of interesting because you always end up using about half of your current fuel whenever it's time to decouple. Then it goes back to the full tank, and then you use about half of it, and then it's time to decouple again, half of the remaining. I mean, it's starting to get a little wobble action going on there. Let's deactivate the SAS. making our jewel encounter happen. Didn't have to push too far outside of Jewel's orbital line either this time. That's interesting. Let's go ahead, now that we have our encounter, warp out of the Mun's sphere of influence so we can see just where that's going to be. We did cut it short this time a little, so it's understandable that it wouldn't be as close as it has been in all of our other transfers. Let's line that up with Tylo a little. There we go. Now that that's lined up with Tylo, whenever we do our normal or anti-normal changes and the degree of inclination, it'll be a little easier to get a beat on that. Looks like we have to be pointing normal. Let's go ahead and warp to that descending node, and along the way make sure it's ready to point normal. And let's see if that affected this much. Looks like it did. It brought it in a good bit, but that's okay. While we're at it, we're going to go ahead and set Tylo as our target. And we're going to have to do a few things to correct this. But for now, the first thing we're going to do is do that normal burn to normalize our descending node to a nice 0° inclination. And we're just simply waiting for that to lock on to the normal mark on our nav ball so we can do that. Once we do, we're going to burn it up a little bit, and then we're going to adjust our camera angle to try to catch the line as perfectly as possible. Now that we're here, let's go ahead and burn until our periapse is a little higher. Once it's high enough, let's go ahead and begin to slow that down just a hair. Let's zoom in and make sure that Tylo's orbital line is nice and flush with itself, like so. Then zoom back out, and then continue to bring that periapsis up to that. Once it's real close, we'll cut off again. Let the vessel realign itself back to the normal mark. Bring that up until it's in line with that, like so. Alright, so that's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Pretty close on that degree of inclination. Not sure we can really do much better than that right now. Let's go ahead and point back to prograde so we can try to bring that periapsis in a little closer here. Kind of want it to be very close to being right on that line, if possible. That way we're not wasting too much delta V making this encounter and getting into Tylo orbit and setting up the rendezvous with that vessel so we can dock up to it and bring it home. It's going to be pretty close to Tylo's sphere of influence, which is under 30,000 meters altitude around Tylo, so might get a little interesting, might not. Guess we'll find out. Never really done a docking that close around Tylo. I've done it pretty close, like 50,000 meters, 60,000 meters, but still, I digress. Let's get this moving. Let's go ahead and move that in. Looks like Tylo's going to be clear on the other side, but that's alright. We'll take what we can get. Let's go ahead and manually time warp ahead once. Make sure it doesn't affect our periapsis there too much, and then we will warp, let's say, out here to, what is that, pole we'll warp to close to being outside of Pole's line there. Really the only threat that we have to worry about right now is the fact that this is an unmanned vessel. Need to make sure that it does not lose communication ability. But when we made this, we did put the 8888 Communitron parts on it, so it should be fine. It's certainly not going to lose power because housed inside of this thing somewhere we placed some nukes for power, so we really don't have to worry about losing power, so we can keep the lights on and all that jazz. Now it's just a very long, slow transfer to Joule from here that we're waiting for. Let's go ahead and exit warp mode by hitting circle or B on the Xbox. That way we don't accidentally affect that in any way. This is good because once we arrive right outside of all the lunar orbits there, we can bring our periaps in just a little more tightly and then warp over to it and burn retrograde until we are in orbit of Joule to where it's grabbed us and we won't escape Joule, and then we'll cut off there and move on to our descending node and correct it to 0 degrees, and then we'll wrap back around to the periaps this one time and retro burn again until we have our Tylo encounter set up. Then of course we'll go there and make orbit and pretty much do the same thing to make an encounter with this vessel, and then we'll dock it up and bring it home and find out what we're going to be doing from there. So after we are done with this episode today, which we're going to do maybe one or two more, but after we're done with this one in particular, we'll have this return to Kerbin from the surface of Tylo knocked out, which is one of the harder missions to do in this game, up there with the likes of returning from Eve's surface, but still not nearly as hard as that one. As well as bringing this Tylo Lightstone back to Kerbin. We'll have both those knocked out and we'll figure out where we're going to be heading off to next. And I'm assuming that we're going to be heading to Pole here. We can go ahead and check out Pole since we have time to. Let's go ahead and focus our view on Pole and hit the info on it. This moon was especially hard to spot as it looks just like a pollen grain, particularly when observed through telescopes based near dusty fields. Pole was finally discovered when someone decided to write down the location of pollen after having given up on yet another failed attempt to be rid of the smudge. That's an interesting description. Let's check out its physical characteristics. It has 0.03 Gs of ASL gravity compared to Kerbin. It's not very much at all. Equatorial radius is 44 kilometers. So where's the... Is that really... Wow, that's not very large. The SOI is only not very much at all. It's like 10,042 meters. Or maybe 10,420 meters. There we go. So that's going to be a very easy moon to deal with. Check out the escape velocity. It's only 181.1 meters per second. It's going to be kind of like going to Gilly all over again. Except Gilly is much lighter and requires much less escape velocity. So at least it won't take as long to land and do all that around Pole this time compared to what it was like around Gilly. But it is certainly a low mass, low gravity lunar body. So that should be relatively easy and relatively fun to do. I know that the moon itself has a very interesting surface. Zoom in and get rid of this so we can actually rotate the camera and take a look. As you can see, it's very colorful. Only thing is, it's also very jagged and rocky on its surface. I do believe there is an Easter egg that we're going to explore here. Finally check some of those out, and knock some of those out along the way instead of having to continue the tutorial series after all the World Records Keeping Society missions are done. We are still going to check out tons of Easter eggs once we reach that point, but there are some we can knock out along the way. Like here at Pole, there are a couple more I'm really excited to check out. Especially the one around or on Val, but there's also one on the second moon moving in to the Jewel system here. Bop. There's a very special Easter egg to check out here, which will be, I want to say, right around here on its surface. Like right there, it's on the dark side rotating around. Should be like right around here. A very special one. It looks like there's a unique little polar feature there as well, like there are on most planets, or on most worlds. Which I actually found out not too long ago, doing a little bit of experimenting, you know, just running around checking stuff out. Looks like we're almost at our destination. We are now in Jewel's sphere of influence, but if I can get a beat on Jewel real quick, I'll have to zoom out to get this, I suppose, but if I put the focus on Jewel and zoom straight into its northern pole, if you look closely enough, see, I'll get rid of the user interface to maybe try to see this a little better. There is actually something similar here on Jewel. It's really hard to see this way. You'd have to pretty much do it. Yeah, you can kind of see it there now. You can see the little dots and stuff, kind of like the hexagon that's seen on gas giants in real life. There is a unique feature there. It's purely cosmetic since you can't land, but even with the gas giant here on the northern and southern pole, it does affect it that way as well, which is interesting. But we are here now. It is time to get this mission going. Now let's go ahead and point retrograde in advance before we warp over to this periapse and begin to wrap ourselves around Jewel here and create this Tylo encounter. Let's check out our vessel, make sure everything's righty-tighty and not lefty-loosey. Looking good. Still have three stages remaining after we burn through this 416 meters per second remaining in this stage. So that'll give us another 3.5 or so. Yeah, about 3.5 total. 3,500 total meters per second of delta V to get ourselves to our vessel and docked up. We should still have a little bit remaining by that point, but I'm going to go ahead and warp to that periapsis now. So we're close enough to the retrograde. Maintaining communication, which is great. I'm going to go ahead and let it continue to get itself over to that retrograde mark. Do a little bit of rotating to get this lined up a little better, because I'm a stickler for that. Fairly close to being right on top of that retro mark. Let's go ahead and warp all the way over to the periapse now, or periapsis. And then we'll pretty much just be keeping an eye on our Jewel escape node there. And let's also make sure to get that periapsis highlighted. and begin our burn. Wait for that to wrap itself around the comforting arms of Joel's gravitational pull. Not very comforting, actually. It's quite terrifying, but anyways. As soon as we get our orbit here around Joel... Oh, looks like it's time to stage. Alright, let's do that. And goodbye, large central stage. We are in the mid-section. It's moving a lot faster. A lot more delta V due to those outer stages. And we have achieved orbit around Joel. Now it's time to move on over to our descending node, but let's point normal on the nav ball, lock on to that normal mark on the nav ball in advance before we warp over to the descending node and correct the degree of inclination to as close to 0 as possible. And we'll warp back around and get this Tylo encounter so we can be on our way to that dreaded moon and hopefully never have to come back here again. As soon as we nail down our lock on that normal mark, let's go ahead and warp on over to our descending node and get ourselves going here. And we'll take a moment to wrap back around to the periapsis once we're done with this, but we'll only have to do it once, hopefully. Let's warp just a little closer. I think I may have brought it in just a little bit too close, but the thrust to weight ratio is okay. So I'm going to cancel it right about there. And check out what that thrust to weight's looking like. Not bad. We'll wait till we're pretty much right on top of it and then kick the tire and light the fire. Here in about 3, 2, 1, 0. Let's go ahead and bring that on down to 0. Wait for it to wrap around a little bit like that. Fantastic. Alright, now for the fun part. Let's make this encounter happen. Let's warp to the periapsis. Once it reaches far out here to the apoapsis, it is going to cause it to take a little bit longer since it is reducing its orbital velocity down quite a bit. We need to also make sure that we're not going to smash into any of these other moons along the way. If I'm not mistaken, we haven't scored a flyby of any of the other lunar bodies around Joel, so it's going to be kind of hard to predict which one it's going to send us off to next. For all we know, it could even send us out to Dres or Moho, or even Elu. Hopefully not asking us to go land on Eve and return from Eve after it's seen that we are able to do that at Tylo. Hopefully it doesn't think we're that fantastic yet. But if I had to guess, it will likely send us to Pole, because that's the moon that it should have sent us out to begin with. But since we happened to do a little bit of a flyby around Tylo there accidentally last time we were doing a mission at Joel, it decided to send us there instead, which was very regretful, because for your first lunar mission around the Joel system, you don't want to go to Tylo, because it's pretty difficult. In fact, that's one of the late game things you want to do, which we are pretty late game now, but we still have pretty much almost an entire solar system within the Joel system itself to explore. But I digress. It's time to refocus back on the mission here a little bit. See, we're 6 minutes away from that. Looks like Tylo's still going to be on the other side. But that's okay. Once we start retro burning, we'll start to see that separation over rapidly rotate around, much like in the past with any kind of encounter setup that we've ever done. We do need to make sure we're keeping an eye on those outer stages too. Looks like we have the first decoupling of the staging here coming up in about 400 meters per second. Let's try to warp a little closer to our periapse here. Make sure it's highlighted as well, so we can keep an eye on that and begin our retro burn. Once that's down to about 20 to 40 meters per second or so, we'll know it's time to stage. For now, we're just keeping an eye out for that encounter. It may help if we cut it off once the apoapsis. Oh, okay, there it comes. Here it comes. Alright, that was fairly close. If we warp over to the apoapsis and do a retro burn there, I believe it'll help us out pretty greatly, because our periapsis here is not quite on the line of Tylo's orbit, so we need to bring that in a little more. And I suspect upon arriving at the apoapsis and doing that, we'll see this closest approach node here reduced drastically and almost have our encounter ready to go. But I'm going to go ahead and point prograde in advance. That way when we warp over to the apoapsis, it'll already be pointing retrograde for us, if not close to. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and warp over there now, and by the time we arrive, we'll have 5 seconds to the node itself, I believe. See, now the separation's down to 10,000 meters, or 10,000 kilometers, almost 11,000. But let's check our staging. It's time to stage those as soon as we get here. And we have arrived. Let's go ahead and stage. Boost a little bit to get those away from us. And let's... oh, well, looks like boosting a little bit got us an encounter with something. What is our encounter with? Is it with Tylo? I guess it is. How about that? Just by boosting a little bit like that. Interesting. Let's focus on Tylo and see what we have. Wow, that's almost a Tylo orbit just from that. That's pretty impressive. You know what? I hope it doesn't affect it too much when we bring it down. Okay, I believe we're going to just take what we have there since it's awfully close. Maybe we can try to bring it in a little more. Let's update our quick save finally, since we haven't done that at all in this episode. And try to bring that down just a little. Oof, okay, that's pretty close. Let's point prograde and try to bring that back out a little bit to make it more accurate. So we barely even used any delta V moving away from those stages there. That's interesting. But let's cut the engines off here, these two outer engines. And then we will highlight the central stage and reduce its thrust limiter down to about 10 or close to it. And once we're pointing prograde, we'll bring that periapsis up a little. Let's also go ahead and set the J2 as our target, so we can kind of get a beat on where we're going to need to be. And let's go ahead and raise that up to close to 30,000 or so. That'll be fine. Looks like it's going to be clear on the other side. Let's make sure it's... see, it's orbiting around this way, so we want to make sure that we're going to be as well. It looks like we are. Alright, let's go ahead and manually time warp a little bit, make sure it doesn't mess around with our periapsis there too much. And let's warp on over to it, or close to it. We are going to have a decent amount of burn time to deal with here. So upon arrival, we need to make sure that these engines are cut back on and this thrust limiter here is back up where it needs to be. Can see ourselves slowly approaching Tylo, and then now we've been grabbed by its massive gravitational influence. It's time to cut these engines back online and bring that thrust limiter back up as we automatically adjust ourselves back to the retrograde mark. Do a little bit of rotation to make this look a little better. And once we are locked onto retrograde, let's go back to our map view, refocus on our vessel by hitting the 2 sticks in, exit warp mode by hitting circle or B. We are quickly approaching that periapsis. We have about 40 seconds or less to go. Let's go ahead and make our orbit happen now. And we'll keep retro burning until... Let's check our staging. Alright, we have plenty of delta V until it's time to stage, so we don't have to worry about that just yet. Close to 700 meters per second or so. Let's re-highlight our periapsis as it continues to drop. We'll keep an eye on this intersect node. We don't want that periapsis to drop too far down though, so we'll cut that at about, say, there. Let's try to figure out... Okay, it's clear on the other side of Tylo. We're going to have to do some orbits here. So if we leave our apoapsis out here, that will allow the J2 to bring itself in a little more. Which means every pass the intersect will... The separation in the intersect node will close up a little bit. See if we can't time warp a little more now. Let's keep an eye on our altitude so we know when to do that. So as soon as that hits 60,000, it'll be time to increase it again. We may lose signal with it at some point here. There it goes. We have just lost communication with our vessel. Something to be concerned about. But we do have that relay station in orbit to help us out a little bit. There comes the J2 under us, wrapping itself around a little quicker. I think one more pass and we'll have a nice distance to be able to work with that J2 vessel. Let's get a fix on that while we're at it. And its apoapsis and periapsis is still looking good. Once we hit that intersect node, I believe it will adjust at that point, and then we'll know what we need to do. Just waiting for that now. There it is, nice and close there. Now for the fun part, we need to bring that in a little better. Let's cut our time warp about here and see just how much we can affect this. Might have to retro burn, might have to pro burn, or do a little bit of radial burning. We certainly do need to adjust our descending and ascending node though. Let's see, we burn retro. Just how much is that going to decrease our periapsis? Okay, here we go. Let's bring that intersect 2 node in since it'll be closer. And once we have it as close as we can get it, say, okay, so close to 7,000 kilometers. We know where that's going to be now. It wouldn't hurt to go ahead and do that now. Let's cut off those outer engines again so we have more control to fine-tune that, as well as the central engine, which we are going to bring back down to about 10 or so. Let's point prograde, and then we'll bring this in as close to that 7 kilometer separation as possible, since we know that's as close as it's going to get for now, which we'll correct shortly. And the periapsis was very close to dipping under 30,000 meters, so it's a good thing that it's not going to need any more retro burning. But anyways, let's now that we're on the prograde mark, let's go ahead and try to bring this down as much as possible. I believe we can get it a little better than that. Okay, so that's fairly as close as that's going to get. Let's also go ahead and point ourselves anti-normal in advance. Let's go to our thrust limiter on this central stage and bring it up to about 50 or so. And warp on over to our ascending node. Accidentally swapped over to the KSS3 relay station. We'll just have to swap back over to the J2A and then continue from there. Let's see, we are 40 minutes into the episode now. Might have to extend maybe an extra 10 minutes or so, but we'll find out. Seems like I'm always having to extend it over very small little things that happen. Alright, let's switch back to the J2A and get back on mission. If you've been enjoying the music, by the way, this is the Across the Universe 10 mix for March 2020. It's a trance set, and I had just uploaded this before this episode, and you can find it here on this channel if you are interested in checking out some awesome trance music, if you're into that sort of thing. Now, let's go ahead and continue as planned. We're warping over to this ascending node. Once we reach it, we will burn until we get the desired results. Hopefully that's not affecting them too much. There we go. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ooh, very, very nice. Very, very close to where that needs to be. We could go ahead and warp over to this apoapsis and try to fool around a little bit with maybe some radial burning. We have tons of delta V, so we don't have to be too concerned about that. See if we can't bring those in a little closer. Just want to make sure that the periapsis is not being messed up too much. Let's try to start with a radial outburn and see if we can't bring that in a little closer. 10.5 kilometer separation really isn't that bad. I would very much prefer it to be much closer than that though. But it's still within 15 to 20 kilometers tops. That's about the farthest degree of separation that I'll accept myself. Okay, so radial out is not doing what we want, so let's go to radial in. It may increase it out a bit too much and we may lose our encounter. But we'll find out here shortly. And hopefully, let's see, it's looking like we're going to have connectivity, and that won't be any cause for concern. But we are going to have to move quick once we do get this encounter, before we do lose our communication ability. Alright, so radial end's doing the trick. Let's keep an eye on that periapsis. Don't want it to move in too close. And let's cut the throttle, bring it in nice and slow now. Yep, we scored a 0.0. Let's quick save and take that. We're just going to have to burn 140 meters per second of delta V very quickly once we get there. Let's reactivate our outer stages, engines. Make sure the throttle on that central stage is back up to full. Let's turn our SAS off and turn it back on so we're not locked onto any node particularly, and then go to target mode. And let's manually time warp ahead once. Did not affect it, very good. Let's try to warp a little closer. See, that'll give us plenty of time. Let's go there. And make sure that we are ready to point retrograde upon our arrival. We should actually be able to see the J2 over here. Is that the J2? No, I believe that's the station. The J2 should be behind us, I thought. But I suppose it's not. And that is coming in closer and closer as we go, so that is the J2 after all. We're going to dip below its line, which will allow us to catch back up to it now. And then we'll be raising back up on our altitude here momentarily as we approach it. Starting to raise our altitude now as we quickly approach it. Let's make sure that we are set to target mode and locked onto retro. We have 139 meters per second to burn off. Let's see how far away we are now. We have to do this within 20 seconds. We're almost locked onto the retrograde. We have to do this fairly quickly. As soon as we hit that retrograde mark, let's begin our burn. Drop it down to about 50. And then we can just eyeball it from here. If we're not careful, we're going to smash right into this thing, though. So once it hits about 500, we'll throttle up to about a quarter of its impulse. We'll drop that down to about 10 meters per second or so. And let's rotate the vessel a little bit in preparation. Let's see, we should be safe. It doesn't look like we are going to smash into it. So now we're just waiting to park ourselves right beside it. Once we're close enough, let's go ahead and reduce our speed just a wee bit more, maybe down to about 5 meters per second. Look at that. Little command pod chilling here waiting to be picked up. Alright. We'll just let it pass us a little bit, and then we'll reduce that down to as close to 0 as possible now. And looks like we need to open up the docking port on this pod. That would probably help a little bit. Let's go ahead and do that and set this docking port as our target and lock onto the target. And we'll do a control from here with this docking port and make sure that we are locked on to the docking port particularly itself. And then let's be very careful about how we do this part. We'll see how the target lock goes on its own. They are going to end up being awfully close, but it should not be a cause for concern. And remember, we have no monopropellant in the command pod since we used it to finish off our orbit. So we can't use it, we have to use what we have in this one, and thankfully we didn't use any at all because we only have 40 units of monopropellant in this vessel. But it looks like we're safe. Let's go ahead and deactivate the SAS and reactivate it. Go to docking mode, activate our RCS, and begin to boost towards the command pod here. We'll just leave it at 0.1 meters per second and deactivate the RCS. Let's swap the rotation mode and try to line our panels up a little better here to where they won't conflict with one another. Say about, that's pretty close. Say about there, that should be good. Now we're just waiting to dock. Try to get a better view of this really quickly. Move in there, come on. Fantastic, that was as easy as it gets. Let's make sure that RCS is off. Let's go to map mode and come back so our kerbals aren't in the way of the nav ball and everything reorients. Now it's time to point ourselves to prograde, making sure that we are controlling everything from this remote guidance unit, this probe core. Set control from here. There we go. Now we'll let it go back to prograde. Let's check our engines out, make sure everything's at full capacity. Let's also go back to staging mode. Let's see, make sure our staging is correct. Just waiting to get a good look at the decouplers there, very good. And that'll go off, leading us to that stage. Okay, so it looks like we just need to separate these decouplers from these chutes in the meantime. So let's do that. Looking good. Alright, now we just need to make sure that those decouplers are in their proper locations. Make sure these are going off first. And they are. Good. And then that would lead us to assuming these are going off next. Which they are. Good. And then we just need to make sure that once we undock as we descend through Kerbin's atmosphere, that these are the drogue chutes, and they are, and those are the larger chutes, which they are. Groovy. Okay, let's update that quick save and get these kerbals home, shall we? let's go back to our map view, zoom back out. Let's see where we are relative to Jewel and Kerbin. See, Kerbin's right about out there. It's a little beyond where it needs to be. We're going to take this thing into a solar... Well, no, we're not. We're going to get this thing into Jewel orbit and then take it from there. Let's warp to the other side of Tylo so we can just be right outside of Tylo's orbit, and we'll leave Jewel from there. Let's also go ahead and set Kerbin as our target in advance. Just select any point on its orbital line and set it as our target. Zoom on back in here. And we are simply waiting to be on the opposite end of Tylo, pretty much right about there. Yeah, we can make this happen a little quicker. Let's go ahead and lock on the prograde, and as soon as we're locked on, we're going to increase the line on the other side of our orbit. That way we can get a little bit more time warp action going on. Not going to increase it too much though, just in case, because we are almost out of delta V on these two stages. We still have another central stage there though. Need to check our mass though while we're at it at some point. Let's first go ahead and increase the apoapsis there out to maybe, say, 150, 200,000 meters or so. And we'll take that and begin to time warp again. And we're going to try to time warp out to about there. Now we're slowly increasing our altitude. Let's say by the time we're halfway warped over, it should increase the time warp speed a little bit to speed things up a little bit more. So here in about 10 seconds or so. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There's a little bit of an increase, and it should do it again here in just a moment. Now we're moving. As soon as we reach this spot, we'll wait until we are locked back on to prograde, and we're just going to burn and get ourselves out of Tylo's sphere of influence, which should take us beyond it, out here somewhere. And then we can wrap our orbit around in a nice stable orbit and prepare to make our way home from there. We are waiting, and we are there. Now let's go ahead and throttle up. Oh, looks like it's time to stage. Is it really? Oh, B. Alright, let's get rid of those. And then go back to our map view so we can keep an eye for that orbital line to hop out once we leave the sphere of influence. So we're at about 119 tons using, I believe, a mainsail right now. Yeah, okay, so we're fine. Okay, are we gonna leave Tylo's sphere of influence sometime today or not? Let's keep that highlighted so we can keep track of it. Shouldn't be too much more at this point. Once it starts to rapidly increase, and it's starting to pick up pace pretty quickly now. We're almost at escape velocity. And that should be here in just a second or two now. Right about now. Okay. Now it's time to bring this periapsis and that apoapsis out beyond Tylo's sphere of influence. Whichever one happens first, we'll take the apoapsis. We'll extend it out to about there. And let's warp on over to it now. Let's say goodbye to Tylo as we prepare to say goodbye to the Joule system. Here it comes, trying to grab us again, but nope, not today, Tylo. And we have arrived. Let's wait for it to orient itself back to prograde. Then we're going to increase our periapsis out to 85 million. And prepare to come home from there, which it looks like we're almost lined up to do already. Except the Kerbin's on the opposite side of where it needs to be, but that's okay. Let's go ahead and do this prograde burn and get that periapsis out where it needs to be. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, cut. Oh, okay, it's 85, that's right. Let's go ahead and do that then. Whoop, there we go. Alright, we should be clear of bop there. There's something on bop that we really want to avoid that we haven't seen in a while in these tutorials. Not going to give away what that is though, because that would give away what the Easter egg is, and I don't want to do that just yet. So let's do this time warp. Let's do the time warp again. Anyways, barring any more cheesy references there, we're just waiting for Kerbin to wrap around to the proper location to where it is at the edge of its orbit, and we can see the communication line making a straight line to us in this vessel here. And once it's there, it's only a matter of prograde burning in line with the target mark, like we do to go anywhere, and hopefully have enough delta V to do it. And it looks like we are going to be extending the episode just a little bit. Hopefully not too much. It's been a while, really, since I nailed down a nice 1 hour episode, which would have happened in the last episode had it not been for the disruption in the internet connection, which I am still apologizing for. Alright, it is almost in line. Let's go ahead and cut the time warp right about now. Now we just need to warp around until that prograde mark is right there with the target mark, like so. Let's get a visual on that. So you can see Kerbin at the edge of its orbit there, with a line straight to us. And we are almost at the edge of the current orbit we have around Joule. So let's go ahead and continue to time warp until we are right about there. Pretty close. By the time we're done with all the burning, we will be. But let's go ahead and start our burn and get out of here. It is time to go home. Just gonna keep on burning until this is out of fuel. But I suspect by then we'll be relatively close to being at a point to where we are escaping the gravitational influence of Joule. Guess we'll find out. Fairly close. Let's go ahead and stage. Let's cut the throttle just in case anything wild happens. Then throttle up. Looking good. Let's go full throttle. Look at that thrust away. Lordy. Okay, let's check out that thrust away if we can. Oh, we better go ahead and zoom out before we fool around though. And now let's go ahead and... Wow, that's really moving. Okay. Let's just go ahead and get this done first before we check out our threat. Well, I don't know. I really want to see that. Let's do that. Let's show all. Thrust awaits 3.45 and 2.7, and then the central engine there is at 1.98. Wow. Alright then. Let's go back to hide all, and then close the Delta V Tools menu, and resume our burn. Very stable. Really digging it. It's a great little safety vessel that we have to send out for any future needs there. It turned out to be very useful, especially at Tylo. And it is time to stage right about now. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's get away from those. What is our mass? Because we are pushing about 600 tons worth, and we are at, or 60 tons worth. We're at about 42 tons. It's not bad. Let's continue our prograde burn. Bring that periapsis down until it hits Kerbin's line. this is starting to worry me because it is very slowly bringing itself down now. Well, we have tons of Delta V. I think we'll be okay. So I've made it back from Joule with about this much Delta V, so I don't know what gives there. Look at that apple abscess. It is trying to head off to another star system or something. Does it think it is a Voyager probe? Anyways. Just bringing that periapsis in. 500 meters per second remaining on this stage. This may be a cause for concern. I'm not quite sure. We need to bring it down to about 13.3 million. Or is that billion? Wow, okay. 13.3 billion. It's time to stage. Is it? Yes, yes it is. Okay, let's stage. Alright. This is it. Hopefully we can do it. And we still have to correct our descending node as well. Oh boy. Maybe doing this the hard way, actually. Let's go ahead and get out of... Well, before we get out of Joule's system, let's do a quick save just in case this is a bad idea. Let's go ahead and warp to this descending node. We want that degree of inclination to be taken care of ASAP. So let's go ahead and try to take care of it now while we have the chance. Make sure that we are pointing towards the normal mark on our nav ball before we arrive. And then, if I'm not mistaken, we can either do a retro burn or a radial end burn to finish this off. Maybe a good idea to have left Joule's sphere of influence while doing this. Or it may not have been. It may have been easier around Joule. But I just had a gut feeling that we need to go ahead and do this. Why is do not set as our target? Let's set that back to Kerbin. And now that we are pointing at normal. Wow, that moved really quick. I want to point it at anti-normal and see just how much control this thing has. That's impressive. It's a nifty little vessel. Okay, if it ever does that, just go over here to the staging, move your mouse around it, and then go back. Then you can zoom in. It's just such a nifty vessel. I really appreciate this vessel. Alright, anyways. It's time to continue warping over to that descending node. Oh yeah, we should probably be pointing normal. Ha ha ha. Let's go ahead and get that highlighted as well. So as soon as we arrive, we can throttle up immediately and get that corrected. Begin to watch for our Kerbin encounter. Okay, thankfully that's not going to take a whole lot of Delta V, and cut. Alright. Now, let's try radial end first. I believe it would be the safest bet. Let's highlight that periapsis. Make sure it's moving in. Very good. Go full throttle. If I'm not mistaken, that'll bring it in a lot faster than a retro burn would. Might be more ideal to do this type of burn for the sake of our Delta V, but it is going to make us come in a lot hotter once we arrive in the Kerbin system, so that itself alone presents a danger. But once that's about 13.3, let's keep burning then. Need to bring that approach in. I don't know if we're going to have the Delta V to do it though. Let's point retrograde, see if this helps out. Oh yeah, that's much better. Okay, let's highlight our resources too. Need to keep an eye on that fuel. The fuel is burning a lot faster than our approach is being brought down. Very concerned about this. May have been wiser to continue burning radio in. I'm not sure though. moving it though. Let's go back to retro and compare it. Yeah, retro is much better. Probably should have been burning retro to begin with. I'm gonna put the focus on Kerbin to get a better view of things here. See, we're almost out of fuel. We might have to launch out a rescue mission just for this again, which is not good. But I think it'll be fine. We'll just do what we have to do. Okay, so that takes us out to there. Looks like we are indeed going to have to do a rescue mission. Hopefully this thing does not encounter Eve. That would be terrible. It could fling it out of our system if it does at any point. It is a 2-degree inclination off, but that's not to say that Eve couldn't still grab it. That is almost where it needs to be to do our launch from Kerbin. I don't know. It's very strange. We're gonna have to wait for it to pass by us and then do it though. That's the crazy part. We can go ahead and get that lined up though. It looks like we are gonna have to do this as a rescue mission. It's gonna be quite the rescue mission too. That should have been enough Delta V to do this. Not liking this. You know what? I'm just gonna reload that quick save instead of making this a rescue mission because something's not right about that. We should have had enough Delta V. I was slightly concerned that it wouldn't have been, but it shouldn't have been that far off. Something's not right about that. Now, where did we quick save? Okay, so we're still around Joule. We're still burning prograde. I don't think it would hurt to actually try to do a little bit of a normal burn either. From here, actually. To try to bring that down. So it's right about there. That's not bad. Okay, now let's continue our prograde burn. And where are we? We're still on our central, or final stage remaining there. We'll just see if we can't make this happen. Let's open up our resources. What is this? Flyby of Val. Oh god. Flyby of Lathe. Oh god. It's gonna send us to Val and Lathe? No, we don't want that. When did that happen? I don't get it. Why did it... When did we... I don't understand. That never happened. How's our fuel looking? Okay. And how's our periapsis looking? Okay. Man, this is really gonna be tight, isn't it? Hopefully it's where it needs to be. Ah, the descending node keeps increasing. It's gonna be awfully close. I think either way, we're still going to end up doing a rescue mission. Well, I'll be... Let's, I don't know. I really don't know. This is gonna end up being a rescue mission either way, though, isn't it? Wow, and that's gonna fling it out of the system. That's not good. It was better off the way we had it last time. That persistent save might be where we had it last time. Let's load it up and see where that leaves us, and we'll take it from there. and decide what we're gonna do. Just did not have enough Delta V, I guess. It's kind of crazy. But we'll get this done. We will make it happen. It's nothing to be concerned about. If this loaded us to where it was with the first results of this, then we'll take that, take a short break, come back and finish the rescue mission. Or do the rescue mission, I suppose. Let's see where we are though. Let's find our vessel. There it is. Now where are you heading? Not where we wanted it to be. Guess we'll just have to reload that quick save and do that again. There may be a way to do this still yet though. I'm gonna do one last thing to try to see if we can't make it happen, and if it still doesn't work, then we'll make it a rescue mission. I've had to do this in the past before. It's a little bit lengthy of a process, a little bit meticulous, or meticulate, but it'll work if necessary. Still though, a flyby of Lathe and Val, how did that happen? I don't get that. And those are the inner moons. We didn't come anywhere close to those. Alright, anyways, let's focus up. Let's go ahead and warp on over to our descending node again. Knock that out. Keep an eye on our Delta V. I really get the feeling we can still pull this off though. But won't know until we try this. Alright, so it's time to explain what I'm about to do, I guess. First I'm going to correct our degree of inclination, and then warp out to the apoapsis, way out there beyond the Elu. And from there, bring the periapsis down on top of Kerbin's. And then continue to do a time warping between the two, periapsis and the apoapsis, until we get our encounter. And do it the hard way, which may take a bit more time, but I think we can do this. Alright, let's highlight the descending node. Let's normalize. Alright, now let's try to pull this off. Well, we need to reduce the apoapsis a little bit, so we're going to go ahead and time warp over to the periapsis some. And do somewhat of a little bit of a retro burn there to bring that apoapsis down so it's not way out there. And like I said, this is going to take a bit more time. Hopefully it pays off though. I've done it before, only whenever necessary. It's a bit of a desperate gamble, but it's all a matter of making sure that Kerbin is in line where it needs to be when we do this as well, which could take way more time than we want, but we'll find out. So there's in no way at all that we have enough Delta V to just retro burn from here and make the encounter. We're going to have to retro burn from the apoapsis to make this encounter happen. And it could get dangerous, or it could work, or it could just set ourselves up for a bit easier of a rescue mission. Either way, no matter what it is, we're going to take what we can get once we're done this time, and I'm going to take a break and come back and finish this mission one way or the other. Okay, now I'm going to begin by reducing that apoapsis down a good little bit here. least try to. I don't want to burn it down any further than about 500 liquid fuel, though. That's when I'm going to start getting concerned about my resources. I'll take that. Alright, now for the excruciatingly painful part. Time to warp all the way out to this apoapsis. And along the way, keep an eye on Kerbin. And if at any point when we get close to that apoapsis, Kerbin is where it needs to be for this transfer back home again, I'm going to cut the warp and start retro burning immediately. And hope for an encounter. But regardless, it won't take too much to get that, or regardless, it won't take too much to get that periapsis down to where it needs to be once we're out closer to this apoapsis. And then it's just a matter of warping around the system and taking the scenic route home, tacking on several more years, maybe dozens, hopefully not too many. We will be clear of Jewel and Elu. That's a plus. Might have to worry about Jewel on the way back though. And there goes Kerbin beginning to make its first wraparound. Kinda wondering, what is Kerbin's orbital speed around Kerbol? 9,000 meters per second, you say. That's almost 1.5 times our current speed. It's on its way down to being half the speed of Kerbin's velocity right now. But it's on its way to being right where it needs to be, which would be right around here. And we're not going to be where we need to be at that point, so we're going to let Kerbin wrap around a couple times before we attempt to do what I'm trying to do. But we'll see what happens. Hopefully it's not too much of a waste of our time here. I think this will end up going to 1 hour and 30 minutes though. But we'll find out. See, right about here is where we would want Kerbin to be if we try to do a retro burn like this. But the orbit's eccentric and we don't want to do it just yet. We need Kerbin to make another orbit. But then we'll be closer to the apoapsis. And we can try to pull it off from there. There's also even a chance that we could make contact with Duna. I'm not so sure about Drez. We're not in any risk of encountering Eve. There's always the risk of getting hit by Jewel though. This almost looks like it's set up to go out to Elu at this point. Which is actually pretty easy to do once we get to it. I can't wait to do that. I love exploring Elu. There's a nice Easter egg there that I really don't ever see anybody talk about. Like, I'm not too sure if it's even listed as an Easter egg, so I may not be spoiling anything to mention it, but there's like a great ice wall that runs for kilometers, tens upon maybe even hundreds of kilometers that I encountered last time I went there. It was quite a while ago. It was just a long wall of ice that wrapped around for as far as the eye could see after I landed. I can't wait to try to find that again. Okay, here comes Kerbin, almost lined up where it needs to be again. I guess we're gonna have to wait for Kerbin to wrap back around one more time. It would be very nice if we reach the apoapsis and Kerbin is exactly where it needs to be, because then we're so far out at this apoapsis, it won't take any fuel at all for us to make the necessary adjustments. Which is what's perplexing, because we should have been fine coming back from Jewel. So I'm kind of curious as to why that didn't quite work out the way it needed to, but I think we'll be okay. We can make it happen. So the closer we get to this apoapsis, the easier it's going to be. At the risk of coming extremely high velocity though. Like, we're talking probably over 7,000 meters per second hitting that atmosphere. Probably much more than that, and hopefully it'll be okay. But we'll find out. Kerbin's almost where it needs to be again, but we're still a few years out. I don't want to do it yet. I don't want to take that chance. But we could just do a quick save and give it a shot. I'll wait for that to hit where it needs to be first, and then we'll try it. The risk of Duna being right there too, though. They're both lined up. Let's go ahead and cancel that time warp now. And reduce that periapsis after we make our quick save first. Yeah, we're just gonna save over that last quick save. That'll be fine. Alright, let's give it a shot. Let's reduce that periapsis now a lot more quickly. Till we get that encounter. Well on the other side, how about that? Yikes. It's really gonna ask us to wrap around one whole cycle, huh? Alright then. Let's see what happens. It's gotta wrap around all the way back around one time before we can do this. May as well just make it a rescue mission at that point, because this is going to take forever. As a consequence, this is the farthest outside of the solar system we've gone, which it's still probably in the solar system, but won't ever know, because I'm not sure that you can actually lose influence of Kerbal or not. I've never really tried that. It would be absolutely insane to try to bring that closest approach around from here, though. We will get Kerbin lined up where it needs to be, and then set this thing up for a rescue mission, I suppose. Let's put our focus on Kerbin real quick. And wait for it to wrap itself around to where it needs to be, and then we'll make this happen. As soon as it hits there, we'll cancel the time warp, set the moon up to where it needs to be, and launch another J2A out there, which may be more than what's necessary for this, but that's what we thought last time, and we don't want to make that mistake again. So let's wrap the mun around now. Ooh, that was fast. Okay. And continue to wrap that mun around a little bit more there. And if I'm not mistaken, that'll be good. Alright, let's go back to our space center and get this going. In the next episode, we are going to launch the J2A again and try to rescue those Kerbals. And we'll see what happens. But for now, thank you for watching. Can't wait to conclude these missions in the next episode. Apologize for not wrapping it up in this episode as planned. It was bound to happen eventually, but we are going to finish this in the next episode, that I can promise you. But until then, I'll see you all here in about 15 minutes after a quick break. I have yet to eat today. I should probably eat, grab something to drink, and then I shall return. But for now, thank you for watching. Hope it's been helpful. Hope you've been enjoying this series as always. And I will see you all again here shortly. Goodbye.